Nous group's been out doing all the site consultations. We've interviewed 65 business partners, regional groups, service providers, consultants. So I'd like to say thank you. A number of you are in the room for spending the time to give us your thoughts and your views. What Chloe will do today is sort of cover three things in terms of the evaluation. The first of which is to give you a little bit of background about what it's intended to do. We won't spend too much time on that. We'll move through that fairly quickly. Second thing is to give you some sense of some of the themes that are coming out of those consultation site visits. We want to spend the most time on that. And we'll finish up with just a little bit of information about the next steps in terms of the evaluation.
So we've been contracted by the Skills Council to conduct an independent evaluation of the WIN program. There's a number of principles which have informed how we've designed our approach. So these include rigour, making sure we have a rigorous approach to data collection and analysis. Balance, pulling together data from a range of qualitative and quantitative sources so we can triangulate evidence. Insight, making sure that our findings clearly articulate what's been achieved and where there have been opportunities for improvement. Pragmatism, as has been mentioned a few times today, this is quite a time-limited intervention, and so we need to be realistic about what sort of impacts we would expect it to achieve in this time frame. And lastly, independence. So whilst we're working quite closely with the Skills Council, it's important for us to be independent and objective in the findings. So we've got four objectives that we're focusing the evaluation around. So this includes assessing the effectiveness and efficiency of the implementation of the program, working out what have been the benefits and the immediate outcomes which have resulted from the program, and looking at that from the enterprise perspective at regional level and at a national level. Identifying what have been key success factors and some of the key challenges which have influenced the outcomes that have been delivered. And lastly, what are the key learnings that would inform broader implementation of the program model? So to meet these objectives, we've identified four key evaluation questions, and these are the questions that we're trying to answer through all of the data collection and analysis that we're doing at the moment. So firstly, what's been delivered by the program? Secondly, how well has it been implemented? Thirdly, what have been the short to medium term impacts through the program? And lastly, what are the key factors that really ensure the success and sustainability of what's been delivered through the program? So we've got, I guess, four key data sources that are feeding into our evaluation findings. These include consultation with the national program stakeholders, so that's the national team, as well as the Principal Advisory Committee, which is the governance mechanism for the innovation projects. Site visits, which many of you would be aware of these. So we've been out to each of the 10 sites to consult with business partners, participating service providers, reference group members, and also some consultants. An online survey, which is a mechanism to go out to all service providers who've participated in the program. And then some of the key program data and documentation that is being developed through the program. At this point in the project, the focus of our data collection really has been the site visits. The other sort of pieces of the puzzle will be coming together over the next couple of months. So that's where we're at, a bit of a timeline of the project. We started at the end of last year. The initial phase was really a lot of planning for the evaluation. So this is developing an evaluation plan and all of the research tools that we've used to go out there and collect data. And then the visit to the 10 regions, so spending a day out in each of the WIN regions to speak to all of the key stakeholders involved. So that's been a total of 65 interviews, which we've recently wrapped up. We've now got a couple more months of sort of data collection activity taking place, leading into our final report in August. So I think it's important to recognise that there are some limitations to the methodology for the evaluation project. First and foremost, as has been pretty clear, the time frame for the program and also then the relative timing of the evaluation. So there's a really large scope of activity occurring within quite a short time frame. And whilst we're currently conducting the evaluation, a lot of this is still underway. It does mean that we're not really able, through this evaluation, to determine what some of those longer term impacts have been, the sort of things that we'd expect to occur sort of 12 months, 18 months, 2 years after some of these things have taken place. Our focus is really assessing the implementation of the program and seeing what some of those really immediate or process type benefits have been that we can observe to date. Secondly, on data sources, as mentioned, so far we've sort of got one piece of the puzzle, which is feedback from the site consultations. At this stage, we haven't been able to sort of test that against other data sources to make sure that we've really drawn key findings from our evaluation activity. And lastly, I think what's pretty clear is sort of also the diversity of the sector. We sort of need to recognise that this means that there will be a range of experiences, a range of needs, and what people have got out of the program will vary. It just means that overall there's no single measure that we can use to measure what the impact of this program has been. And also then when we come to interpret the findings, just some contextual factors to take into consideration. So this is a really large, complex challenge facing the sector, and really the WIN program is only one of a whole series of initiatives that are going to be required to help the sector face the challenge. This is also a fairly large, significant program that's been built from the ground up. It's new. There's been all new processes, systems, tools, structures that have had to be developed across 10 regions around the country to deliver the activity that's been required under this program. And lastly, there are external factors which influence the way that program has been designed and delivered. So what we'll feed back to you now, particularly for you who have provided your time and input to us so far in the evaluation, just some of the key themes that have come out from the site visits. As mentioned, these are sort of key themes. They're preliminary. They're not informed by the other data sources that we are collecting over coming months. But there are a couple of key points which have come through consistently. So looking at each of our key evaluation questions, the first question, what's been delivered? I won't actually talk to this much because I think we've had quite a few presentations on this, but for us looking at enterprise, regional and national level, what are all the activities and outputs that have occurred to date? And it really does give you a feeling of the scale of the program and the different levels that it's operating at. So our second question about the implementation of the program. So in terms of what we can see so far, so the role of the business partner, we got really positive feedback and high levels of satisfaction about the role of a business partner being appointed in each of the regions. It was seen as really valuable to have someone on the ground locally working with service providers to address these issues. Some of the positive attributes in particular that were noted are strong networking skills, strong engagement with the sector, being really responsive and being able to provide advice and information as required, and then also that ability to really test and probe the thinking of an organisation as they went through the RRR process. The Reform Ready reviews themselves, these were seen as quite a valuable opportunity to step back and reflect on the position of the organisation, particularly in the context of upcoming reform. The tool itself was appropriately structured, allowed each of the key aspects of the organisation to be considered, reflected upon, whilst not being sort of a forensic audit. So it really met sort of the purpose without being too extensive. And I think what we've seen, and it's been talked about today, is whilst there was a process for the RRR, a high-level process, the business partners have been really flexible and just tailored the approach to best meet the needs of the organisation. Tailored grants, as we've seen, those are still very much underway, and at the time we were out, most of the organisations we were speaking to were still preparing their application. I think, as Caroline's mentioned, that there have been some reported challenges just about the time required to put that together, and also to be able to define the project and source appropriate consultant proposals to support the application. But in spite of that, the grant is seen as attractive, and most providers do recognise the role of a co-contribution. So then regional level, so the 10 regional sort of reference groups that have been established, we can see that the composition and function of those has varied quite a bit over the regions, which suggests they've been formed to best meet the context of each region in which they've been established. Some of the regions have brought together quite a diverse range of stakeholders across providers and other sector representatives to form their reference group. Others have chosen to establish quite a small group of key service providers providing that governance role, whilst drawing on a much broader network to support the regional project delivery. The regional projects themselves, I think, again, sort of early days, because when we're out, a lot of these are very much still underway. What was clear is that the scope of the regional grant was sufficiently broad, which has allowed each organisation to identify what their own priorities are and their own needs that they would like to address through the project. The process to determine those priorities and what sort of project that is best suited to meet those priorities seems to have been smoothest where the region has been able to build upon a history of collaboration and projects together. Now, the application process itself, we're aware that there was some feedback that was different to other grants that have been applied for in the past, and therefore in some ways it was unfamiliar and challenging, and so we're aware that some of those have gone through quite a few iterations to get approved. Then at the national level, so that's the National Office with the Skills Council, which we can see there's really been a significant effort to define and develop the program ready for implementation. A whole suite of systems, tools, processes have had to be built from scratch. And in some cases, those processes and guidelines did evolve a little bit in the early stages of the program, and that was a process really of getting more rigour and working with the Department of Industry to structure those as they were required. And then lastly, the national forum, so the second of which we're at today. This has been an opportunity to strengthen information sharing and dissemination of best practice across the regions. In some cases, I think business partners have used sort of informal relationships with each other to network and share information, but there's certainly value in bringing everyone together to make sure we're learning what's happening across each of the 10 regions. Lastly, impacts. So certainly a little bit too early to talk about impacts from the program, but what we thought is you can see some of the immediate benefits that are being reported from stakeholders who've participated in the process. At enterprise level, consistent with what we've seen in the case study videos presented, you're seeing that the Reform Ready reviews that opportunity to step away from the day-to-day operations and really think more strategically about the future of the organisation. The findings that have come through from the review process sort of confirm the key priorities. Often those are consistent with what the organisation would have had a gut feel, but it's evidence and data to really confirm what those priorities are and really the need for action. The tailored grants themselves are attractive and effectively it's valuable funding to be able to pursue those priorities in a more immediate and comprehensive manner than may have been otherwise possible, particularly in the context of really constrained funding environment. At regional level, bringing together all of the regional stakeholders in reference groups, in projects, has really established a good foundation for ongoing collaboration and coming together to address common challenges. And beyond the projects themselves, the networking that's occurred has been seen as really valuable in just understanding that organisations are not alone, facing very similar challenges. And as the data has shown, even in varied provider types, sizes, contexts, a lot of people are facing the same issues, so not feeling quite so alone and overwhelmed by the challenge. So lastly, next steps, and I think just in terms of how some of those might relate to people here in the room. So from the consultations, we've obviously only had the opportunity to speak to a selection of providers who've participated in the program. We will be disseminating an online survey, which will go out to everyone who's participated and make sure that as much as possible we can reflect the range of experiences that have happened across the country. As Kristen flagged, we're also looking at the opportunity to re-administer the RR questionnaire to a sample of providers so that we have some kind of pre and post data and can compare to see what sort of changes have occurred within organisations. We'll be conducting interviews with all of the national stakeholders, and then as all of this program data continues to come through, we'll be doing an analysis of the final set of program data and documentation, feeding into our final report and also a set of case studies in July, August of this year.